So that's James' deck dinner. It's rice with curry sauce and bell peppers, cucumber, celery, and tomatoes.
The celery is really
to put on top.
scrunched up there. It looks almost as though it went through a food processor.
Yeah.
So it did, okay.
Rumble. James is going to continue to talk about this, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
And it looks like
I might, if there's
America,
time left. Well, there's so much to cover in this thing.
Agatha Christie's Poirot, The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, and then some other stuff below that. So I don't know if you can see that, but I'll get to it.
The Murder of Roger Ackroyd is supposed to be maybe her classic work. What did you think of the filming?
I thought they did a great job, but they do with
that Hercule Poirot. He is incredible. He looks the part.
Yeah. Yeah. This. I like this rendition of Poirot with David Suchet. And I like this story. It was, and it was feature length, so it was the length you'd expect a movie to be. And it was a good mystery.
Did you solve it, or?
No.
Well, that's usually you do. Usually, it's rare to solve this. Doesn't matter if it's a movie or a.
And I talked about Roman Holiday already. I didn't rate it that well, but you can see I rated it better than these two. But so it's not a total dud. But I did want to mention that you get to see a lot of really beautiful scenery from Rome, and which you would expect, but I didn't say that when I reviewed it before, so I figured I'd tell you. Mary Kills People, the complete second season. I've seen this already. I did not watch the blooper reel because I looked at that on the screen. I'm like, really, a blooper reel with this content? I don't know but maybe it was funny. I don't know. But anyway, this is about a woman she's a doctor who performs assisted suicides for people, and it's illegal. She's doing it illegally. So.
Presumably in the U.S.
Yeah, but I mean, this is made in Canada, and if you look into what the Canadian government stance is on assisted suicide now, you might figure out where they were coming from when they were making this. So. I don't think that the medical system should have anything to do with assisted suicide, because I have known so many people that what really gets them down is the fact that they're not being taken care of by the medical system. So
you got a point there.
Yeah. So I don't think you want to mix up those two. But anyway, that's my opinion. And I should say that it's entertaining enough. Whatever. I don't like the subject matter. The Super stars. At least I'm coughing again.
Without it really messing up your back too badly.
Yeah. Well, one thing that both James and I noticed is when your back is really, really bad, your body prevents you from doing things like sneezing. Like you'll go to sneeze and you'll be like, oh no, and then you'll just swallow it somehow. Because your body's like, yeah, you can't handle that.
My back was so bad, I went a whole year without sneezing.
Yeah.
I'm not into exaggerating and making things up. And during that same year, I believe it was, we'll say 3 coughs, but I think it was more like 2.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm not a fan of Val Kilmer, I have to say, as an actor.
Poor Val.
But he did all right in this one.
Is this him here?
Yeah. It's a
It's
horror
mostly
story.
white.
Yeah. It's
Good.
a horror movie. And it's different than one would expect it to be. So, but it's funny because while you're watching it, when you get to the point where the mystery is solved, you're like, oh, I should have seen that, right? Because there were actually, they gave some hints to it. So, even though this was on the bottom of the stack, because, well, it wasn't as well done as the other one, it's maybe worth watching if you like scary horror movies. Now, for me, watching it right now, it was scaring me too much, and I had to look away for most of it. Like when I noticed, oh, okay, it's going to be a scary part, because I didn't want to jump, right? So, anyway, so not the time to be watching scary stuff. Oh, you don't want the hemp seeds?
Keep forgetting.
Oh, well, you don't have to have them. It's up to
Well,
you.
it's probably healthy.
Anyway, I guess James is going to talk about Rumble now.
I think I basically exhausted it. But,
Oh, you did? I didn't know. Okay.
I don't think. So we'll just review.
You seem to really be enjoying talking about it. So.
I enjoyed it pretty good. I think maybe the native presence in rock and roll and pop music's a little bit overrated in this. It's representing a small proportion of the population, both in the United States and Canada. Here in Alberta, the indigenous population, or as the Americans tend to call it, at least officially Indian population, is about 6%. But I think that would be higher than what is in a lot of places. Oklahoma is former Indian territory. It might have a fairly high percentage. That's where Jesse Ed Davis came from. And I'm willing to bet it's lower than 6% in the United States. They have such a huge population, and they had so many settlers move in so early. Canada, didn't have settlers move into Upper Canada in a serious way until you got not United Empire Royalists coming out of the American Revolution, so that's maybe like 1783 or something like that. And whereas in the United States you had, I'm not talking about Quebec, that's a different case. In the United States, you had folks moving into New England a little after 1600, so that's quite a bit early.
They're still really tart.
The apples off
Yeah. I picked this one
Main
off of my
Street.
big parent tree, and they're small this year. But these ones are a pretty good size, and that's off the baby who's now fruiting. So they're not as big as they normally are, but that's okay.
So I filed prematurely the thing that I was following Rumble up with. I was using it as introduction to the autobiography of Robbie Robertson. He's pictured here on the back of this. And he was featured in the movie, but somewhat extensively, maybe some comments. He was only 50% Indigenous, a whole lot more than I am, but a lot more. 50% Jewish, it's funny how the band, at their best, kind of, and that's almost entirely featuring the writing, composition. Robbie Robertson. It's funny how it kind of gave this feeling of this is the way North America was, and to a certain extent still is. You remember when I first heard a song called Up on Cripple Creek? It would have been sometime in '69. It was just after I got a radio. I was 15 years old when I got a radio. Pretty late. Kids, I think in my grade back then, 70.
I don't know if I can throw.
Here I go. 70.
Yeah. Super.
about 1970. So 1 year after 1969, they were getting cars, stuff like that. With me, we were so poor, I thought it was just grand, radio. A little transistor radio. One of the first things I heard, we got back from picking berries in BC over mainland. We got paid a pittance. Nowadays, they can't get anyone from Canada, so they bring in what's called migrant labor. Anyway, one of the first things I heard on this little red transistor radio was, when I get off of this mountain, you know where I'm going to go, straight down the Mississippi River to the Gulf of Mexico, Lake Charles, Louisiana. Love the geography. The little Bessie girl I once knew, she told me just to come on by if there's anything I could do. And it's sung by Levon Helm, the pride of Marvell, Arkansas, right next to West Helena, which is Arkansas, which is right next presumably to Helena. And I don't know if that's in Arkansas. Anyway, basically on the Mississippi River, Helena. And the rest of the band were Canadians, including Robbie Robertson. And I thought, I've heard this. It sounds like it's a million years ago. It had this weird effect. I swore it was Jew's harp, but apparently it was some sort of I don't know if it was an organ or electric band, some sort of a keyboard done by Garth Hudson, their organ player. He'd fiddle around with electronics too. It wasn't just classical trained. And I loved that. This weird Jew's harp type of effect, old-fashioned. So, and then there's a break, and then there's the outro. Levon Helm yodeling on a rock and roll song. I loved the band. They would do whatever. It wasn't 69. That was the year of Woodstock. They actually played Woodstock. Apparently they stuck out like a sore thumb because they were so quiet. Everyone else was ramping up the volume. It wasn't just Santana and Sly and the Family Stone. It was like Alvin Lee mugging it up on Going Home. All that sort of stuff. I wish I could have seen I've never seen the band's performance. Apparently Creedence Clearwater they refused to get recorded. Would love to have seen Creedence's performance. Love to see the bands, and the one I've seen that was kind of soft was Sweet Judy Blue Eyes by Crosby, Stills and Nash. I don't even know if Young performed on that one. He was there. He performed with them, at least electrically. But yeah, you know, the band's first album. There's Robbie Robertson looking kind of like a rabbi or something like that, a hip rabbi. And on the album cover, it had a gatefold album, or whatever it's called. You know, you open it up like a book. Yeah, you could do that with records. Way back when. And I got that quite late. It was 71, I think. I bought it up in I think Eaton's in Calgary. We're visiting Calgary from Sterling, Alberta. And I got it back, I opened it up, and it's got this picture of the band along with a bunch of, especially like old people. There must have been some young, I just noticed the old people said next of kin. I'm going, wow, that's so politically incorrect. I mean, it was people in 1969, young folks were saying, don't trust anyone over 30. And there's the band doing what's not fashionable. And yet they kind of became. somewhat of a fashion. One of Elton John's first albums. I think his second official album, studio album, was called Tumbleweed Connection. He was trying to channel the band. He did a good job, old Elton. The guy just, I don't know. He could channel a lot of different things at the same time, but he just didn't do it, the band. And part of it was the lyrics. Bernie Taupin was Elton John's lyricist back then. Just wasn't up to Robbie Roberts. But I think what made Robbie Robertson interested in North American, particularly, at least initially, eventually got interested in Canadian history in particular. But particularly American history is, he's an outsider, even though he's a native, an outsider. And doubly so. I think one reason why Canadians don't dominate American comedy, but do very well in American comedy, is because they're part, I'm talking about English-speaking Canadians. They're part of the North American system, economically. The political system's somewhat different, but it's mutatis mutandis, something like democracy, both north and south of the 49th parallel, and its extension out east. And yet they're outside of it. We're not as well off per capita as Americans are. We're generally a little bit better off. The average person's a little bit better off than the average person. The United States and poorer people are probably substantially better off. So we're kind of outside of it, like we don't really can't push people around in the world. Now, is that a bad thing? I'm watching something about Platoon, Oliver Stone. Oliver Stone thinks it's a bad thing that Americans push people around. Americans aren't the neighborhood bully. We're talking about the world. They're the people who, this has been their traditional role. I'm not talking about Donald Trump. I'm not talking about people from not talking about most of the people from historically, at least, from the southeast of the United States, the so-called southern states. America has been the people who kick sand in the faces of the bullies of this world. That's what they did to Germany. That's what they did to Japan. There was serious sand kicking when it came to both. I'm talking about bombing. The English shared in the bombing. They did the night bombing. The Americans did the day bombing together of German cities. And everyone knows what happened to Japan. The anniversary of the bombing of Hiroshima, I think, just passed. It might have been the same day that Robbie Robertson died, or at least when I heard about his death. He might have died the 5th of August. And I'm going to morph into that. Like they were saying, it's a dark day for humanity. Say what? The Japanese in 1945, using scorched earth policy, they still, when the bombs were dropped, apparently had 1 million troops in Japan, and as many on the mainland of Asia. Wow. They killed 1 million Vietnamese people using scorched earth policy in Vietnam. So they're going, I think they were saying 160,000 people were killed in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. 160,000, 1 million. Like how many people would have died in China if those bombs hadn't been dropped forcing the Japanese to surrender. They would have been using scorched earth policy in China. And when the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, there was no guarantee that Russia would join the fray. Of course, they were only too eager. They were so land hungry, ravenous, just gorging. They gorged on land and peoples in Eastern Europe as they moved into East Germany. And of course, they gorged on land out in the east, far east. You know, the Japanese surrendered to the Americans. They surrendered to the Russians. The Russians saying, "Say, can't hear you. Can you speak louder?" Meanwhile, they're gorging up land. "What did you say?" You know, the Japanese keep on surrendering, and the Russians are refusing. It's not even accepting the surrender. It's just ignoring the surrender. That's what they were like. So the Americans thumped the neighborhood bullies, and it should be mentioned that I'm going to go with the Japanese killing 10 million Chinese people during their extended World War II. Basically started in 1937, a couple of years before it started with some other people, and roughly 4 years before it started for the Soviet Union, who were collaborating with the Nazis for a couple of years or so, a little less than a couple of years. Sending them raw materials and stuff like that. Here you go, Nazis. You go west there. You attack those capitalists there and stuff like that. You attack those democratic people there. Get rid of them for us, and then we'll get rid of you. Go west, young Adolf. Go west. And the Americans cleaned the clocks of the Russians with very few casualties during the Cold War. Amazing how well they performed there. You know, I get nifty, shifty, hefty lefties like Oliver Stone and his ilk. Oh, the Americans lost in Vietnam. Yeah, you know, like the Cold War, Vietnam was part of the Cold War for the Americans. Newsflash. The Cold War was over a generation ago. You should be able to figure these things out. So really, it was a theater battle. And smart people, unlike Hitler and Stalin, actually, when they're having a little bit of trouble in a particular field of battle, a theater, I think it's oftentimes called, they retreat. They get the dodge out of hell. They get the dodge out of hell. They don't necessarily get the hell out of Dodge, they get the dodge out of hell. And that's what they did in Vietnam. It's called a retreat, not a defeat, because they kept on fighting. And it was a Cold War. For the Americans, it wasn't that hot. They let the Russians get stuck in their little quagmire. In Afghanistan, they had to retreat from that too, and it was much more damaging for the Russian psyche because even Gorbachev was like that, annoying dictator. And, like he was crushing nationalist movements, right, left, and almost center, north, south, so on and so forth, during the late 80s. And one of the things that would have contributed to it is various nationalities dying, having representatives of their peoples dying, fighting in Afghanistan in a war that didn't make sense. Vietnam, for the Americans, actually made sense. They acquitted themselves quite nicely. The people who didn't want to go and fight and stuff like that, the nifty, shifty, hefty lefties, didn't acquit themselves so well. I mean, apparently they'd sometimes, maybe a lot of times, meet soldiers coming back from the war, and they'd be hurling at least epithets at them, maybe chucking stuff at them. Yeah, bad taste. Oh, these would be working class fellows, people who couldn't get university deferments, people who couldn't afford to go running off to Canada or Europe or whatever, fighting, hey, to protect the freedom of speech that these nifty, shifty, hefty lefties were exercising in such an irresponsible manner by hurling abuse, at least verbal abuse, at these soldiers coming back. Absolutely shameful chapter in the history of American left-wing activity. Absolutely shameful. So, no, Hiroshima was not a dark day in the history of humanity. It wasn't a particularly bright day. What made it dark, ultimately, in the was the sequel. And the sequel was the some of the nifty, shifty, hefty lefties like Oppenheimer, apparently Enrico Fermi, Niels Bohr, a guy that I kind of have a bit of respect for as a scientist, not Niels Bohr. Fermi, half and half. Theoretician, not very good. Experimental scientist, pretty good. But another guy, what was his name? Not Ferenc. Leopold Szilard. How much time?
A couple minutes.
He apparently was contributing to the Russian effort in the Cold War to, at least trying to slip atomic secrets to them. Absolutely shameful history, in a shameful chapter in the history of the world left-wing movement. Fermi came from Italy, Szilard came from Hungary, Bohr came from Denmark, Oppenheimer came from the United States. And Oppenheimer, I think, was the only one who was officially, for a while, a member of the Communist Party. Unofficially, yeah, he would have been, I think, until his death. It's hard to say. Anyway, the reason why they were, Oppenheimer and folks like him were going, oh, don't drop the bomb on the Japanese, was because, like Hitler had been taken care of. The Japanese weren't a threat to the Mother Russia, communist. Like it's kind of like as gruesome, really, especially under Stalin, but even before him under Lenin, and after him under Khrushchev. But kind of like this. You ever seen a forest? What is it? A tent caterpillar's nest? That's kind of like what Russia was during the communist hegemony there. Oh my heavens! It was a communist who started using that in its modern sense of the word. Gramsci's his name, leader of the Italian Communist Party, and kind of like right-hand man, or should I say left-hand man, for Stalin in Italy. But, he was in jail. Mussolini was not a nice guy. Hey, newsflash. Stalin was worse, way worse. Now, Adolf Hitler was, I think, more virulent than Stalin, but less totalitarian. We've talked about this before. We'll talk about it again. So I can guarantee you, if you're a nifty, shifty, hefty, lefty, and you're actually interested in avoiding listening to the echo chambers that you guys are so used to listening to, get ready for some